Welcome, anime fans and the anime curious, to Where There's a Weeb, There's a Way, a podcast series in which a seasoned otaku and a newbie attempt to put together an anime canon. We're going to be taking a look at some of the most influential shows and films, along with some more modern curiosities to help break a newcomer into the medium. We're your hosts, Grace and Chris. Yeah, so today we're actually going to be taking a bit of a round trip. We're going to start off in vampire-riddled Victorian London. We're going to drop in on an equally vampire-riddled, actually 1930s New York City, and finally we're going to be facing down the Pillar Men in World War II era Europe, which may or may not also be riddled with vampires, because that's how things be in JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, parts 1 and 2.
Yes, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Yeah, we're here at long last with one of the most exciting entries in this series so far. You know, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is huge. There's multiple parts. In this one, we're just going to be covering season 1 of the anime, because each one is each part. We'll talk a bit more about what JoJo is all about, but people who have an idea, as you'll know, that JoJo is so huge, you know, there's multiple parts, all with different settings, all with different characters, and it would just be impossible for us to have a moment, just watch all of JoJo, and then, rank the entire thing, because I do think of them as kind of being separate parts, which all form a much wider, bigger series. But for purposes of our sanity, we're just going to talk about parts 1 and 2 of JoJo, which make up the first season of the TV show. Now, you could get nitpicky and say, well, if you're going to do that, then you're going to have to separate parts 1 and 2. Yeah, but I'd make the argument that part 1 and 2 are, really intrinsically linked together. They kind of cover the same plot. They pretty much do. I know most JoJo's do lead into the next one, but, these runs really, really do lead into the next one plot-wise. You really do need to have seen part 1 to understand part 2 more so than any other JoJo adventure. So, for this episode, we are just going to talk about part 1, Phantom Blood, and part 2, Battle Tendency. So this is exciting, because I've talked about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for quite a long time now. I like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure a fair bit. I've seen the first 3 parts and parts of part 4. I like everything that I've seen. It's a strange series, and there's a lot to talk about with JoJo. So, I mean, obviously, you know, I suppose the first thing is that kind of where do you even begin discussing this series? Its influence is so huge. The author, Hiroaki Araki, started writing the series back in the 80s, and it's still going on today. Part 8 has finished recently, JoJolion, and part 9 is due to begin just on the near horizon, JoJo Lands. But yeah, the series is kind of famous for the way that it has, for one, it has multiple sections to the series. You know, there's at the moment 8, soon to be 9 distinct different parts to JoJo, all with a different lead character, a different setting, different sort of like genre that it's kind of aping on, and they're kind of connected together by a much wider narrative, but it's very much just connecting tissue. In that, Araki basically uses it as just a thing of just continuing to explore his artistry and whatever he's into. JoJo is also distinctive for its incredibly flamboyant style, its incredibly famous, and in some cases infamous, character designs with extremely effeminate males, and the way that Araki draws fashion and stuff, and it's had a huge influence on the way that manga authors illustrate their characters, but also had a huge effect on fashion as well. Like Hiroaki got a deal with Gucci at one point to design
wow.
clothes for Gucci. Well, that's kind of how popular this series is. It's kind of gone past the point of being a generic battle series to becoming something much, much bigger. And part of the fun of watching or reading JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is seeing Hiroaki become, like, I guess, more confident as a author. It's also something that's immediate apparent, because when you first watch JoJo or read JoJo, it's very hokey, it's not entirely there yet. There's good elements, there's bad elements, there's okay elements, there's really ill thought out elements, but part of the joy of JoJo is seeing each part get steadily and steadily better, to the point where you can see Hiroaki becoming one of the all-time great mangakas. You know, he gets better along with the series. You know, each part is better than the last, in my opinion, when it comes to JoJo. Certainly what I've experienced of JoJo so far, anyway. Each part does steadily get better and better as Hiroaki gets better as an author and as a storyteller. But for now, we're going to be looking at just the early years, which, as I say, are Phantom Blood, which was originally released between 1987 and 1988, and Battle Tendency, which was released between 1988 and 1989. So we're looking at each part individually, talking about what we thought about the part, and then we'll let you know where we rank these two together on our overall list. And the future JoJo parts we will be ranking separately. I don't know if at some point we might do an overall ranking for JoJo when it's all done. Don't know, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. So we're just going to rank these kind of separately, I think. But keep in mind that I'm very much a supporter of you shouldn't skip any parts of JoJo. I do think you need to start with Phantom Blood, even if it is not the best. It's very hokey, and for reasons we'll get into. But you need to start with part one to, one, kind of understand, I guess, the style of JoJo and where, like, a lot of the really popular JoJo elements come from, like Dio or like Speedwagon or you know, any of the stuff like that. You need to start with part one and then just see it steadily getting better and better. So stick with it. But anyway, we're here today to talk about the anime adaptation of part one, which began airing between 2012 and 2013. It was announced at a special 25th anniversary of the series, where the entire the entire manga series would be adapted by, I think, David Production, and they will be taking the reins on basically adapting all of the JoJo part. And since then, thanks to the successful anime adaptation, JoJo has kind of become even more popular than it already was. It's introduced JoJo to a whole new generation of kind of young fans who might not have got into JoJo otherwise. It's one of those rare, really classic series from the 80s and 90s which hasn't really had like a definitive anime adaptation, and they've done it. We can only hope that the same happens to other popular series like Berserk, but you know, we can only dream, because JoJo the anime is a great example of how you update it and release it to a popular and make it popular. You know, it's been a huge success. In fact, the next one for part 6, Stone Ocean, has actually been bought up by Netflix. Netflix are going to have the exclusive streaming rights to it, so it just shows you how big JoJo's gotten in the last few years. But anyway, we're going to be cycling back a little bit, back to part 1, which is Phantom Blood, where it all began, where all this madness and insanity began. So do you want to have a go at summarising?
Okay, so this is a story about a man named Joseph Joestar. No,
you
Jonathan Joestar.
He's original Jonathan. He's original JoJo.
So Jonathan's dad is like a rich person in Victorian era England. He owes some old guy who was a thief and kind of a bad guy who just accidentally saved his life once. So when this old guy's son, Dio, shows up at the house, who has recently been orphaned, the JoJo family have to, like, take him in. And Dio, for whatever reason, I guess he's really jealous of the nice upbringing JoJo has had, decides to ruin his life. And it all just kind of snowballs from there into Dio becoming a vampire and them having to, you know, get rid of him.
Very, very eloquently explained. A valiant attempt at trying to explain the series, but yeah. So in short, basically, yeah. So Jonathan's dad was basically rescued from death. This old man seemingly rescued. And no spoiler, we're going spoilers everywhere, but we're just going to talk about this whole thing.
Yeah.
Jonathan's dad was saved by this random guy, and Jonathan owes this guy a life debt. So when he dies, the guy's like, the Joestar family owe me a life debt, go live with Dio and make something of yourself. As it turns out, the old man actually wasn't as noble as we kind of thought he was. He was actually a thief who was actually trying to steal some of the Joestar family jewels, I guess. Mm-hmm. But even knowing this, because Jonathan's dad is so pure, he's like, it's fine, this man has more need than me kind of thing. Which basically establishes the dynamic between Dio Brando and the main JoJo of this part, Jonathan. In that, Hiroaki basically said in interviews recently that, like, the whole idea of part 1 was Jonathan is pure and good while Dio is pure evil, which has an interesting effect on the series overall, because Dio is so wonderful and charismatic, and he just takes such a devilish delight in being a bastard. If Jonathan's the establishment of everything that's good, it kind of makes him a very dull character.
Yeah, he is a bit. He's maybe a bit of a bland protagonist.
He's too nice. He's too good. He's not very interesting, which is obviously something that Hiroaki is, to be fair, aware of. It's not something that he's kind of shied away from. But the idea was maybe that whole yin and yang sort of thing. Two opposite characters of the scale, so to speak. If Jonathan is like lawful good, then Dio is chaotic evil. Two complete opposite ends of the D&D alignment scale, basically.
Yeah.
Is how I would describe the two. Things escalate for the Joestar family. Jonathan's dad gets sick. It turns out it was actually Dio plotting to take over the Joestar family name. For a series of circumstances, Jonathan's also a budding historian. He takes an interest in an ancient mask that was found. This ancient mask seems to react to people's blood, and the mask ends up attaching itself to Dio at one point, seemingly killing him. After Dio's plot's been revealed that he wants to take over the Joestar family treasure and all that sort of stuff, turning Dio into an immortal vampire in the process, which is fun. Him and Jonathan have a big bout. And then Dio is seemingly defeated by Jonathan in a big fire, but as it transpires, Dio actually survived and has set up home in a random seaside village. If you British, it's, I guess, Whitby-esque.
Scarborough, maybe.
I don't
Blackpool.
know. Blackpool. It's not quite Blackpool, but and Jonathan has to basically get stronger to take Dio down one more time, because now he's become this really powerful immortal vampire. Along the way, Jonathan befriends a bunch of lovable characters.
One in particular, I think we should save him till last.
Yeah. And they kind of loosely form this little party who go off to defeat Dio. So we should mention right off the bat, basically, with part 1, it is a very swift adaptation of the first part of the manga. The manga is 5 volumes. I think it runs for about 45 chapters and goes into much more depth than the series does. The anime series quite rightly knew that this was like the weakest part of JoJo. Araki's artwork style isn't quite there yet. Some of the proportions look a bit weird, but not in a kind of stylized way that it would kind of become. The artwork's very reminiscent of Fist of the North Star, to the point where at one point I think Jonathan pretty much just wears a Fist of the North Star uniform or whatever they wear in that series. And the story as well is incredibly muddled. Mm-hmm. And starts off as kind of being this kind of Victorian horror thriller sort of thing, then before eventually morphing into a battle manga, and doesn't do it in the most smooth way. It's really ill set up, and the power system's not quite established yet. There's loads and loads and loads of problems with Phantom Blood, but you can tell, for me, coming back to it after having experienced more of JoJo and kind of where JoJo goes kind of thing, it's interesting seeing where all these ideas are bubbling. You can tell there is a need to make the battle system of JoJo interesting. They use a battle system called a Hamon energy, which is all based on breathing and stuff. And there's situations where Jonathan finds himself in where he has to use his wits to use Hammond in an effective way, but in doing so, it makes Hamon like significantly weaker than like all the other abilities of all the other villains in the series. So Hiroaki quite rightly dropped it after part 2 finished. So there's lots of different little problems with part 1 which kind of plague it a bit.
I sort of want to just briefly talk about something in the first episode in particular. The character designs of like JoJo and Dio, and so basically it only occurred to me about halfway through the episode where I kind of felt like everyone was acting a bit strangely. And it occurred to me halfway through the episode that these characters are meant to probably be at most around 11 or 12 years old, and they collectively look on average about 30.
Yeah.
Like they do not look like children at all.
No, not one bit.
But then they do act in kind of childish ways, like Irina, JoJo's love interest, is carrying around a doll, and JoJo gets told off by his dad at the dinner table and he runs away crying. So this is all really strange until you're like, oh, okay, they are meant to be like
meant to be kids.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. They just aren't drawn that way for whatever reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think part of it as well was I think part of it was maybe Iraqi's figures like as like an artist at the time. Maybe he wasn't quite confident yet. I don't know, because like he gets better at drawing kids as he goes along. Yeah,
I think there are kids even kids later in part 1 that look like passable children. So
I mean, to the anime's credit, I actually do like how they didn't like mess around too much with that element, because I think it would have been really easy to kind of like morph Iraqi's like character designs.
Yeah.
I think if the anime like altered Iraqi's character designs in any way, I think there'd be like an uproar. Even if like Phantom Blood isn't quite a perfect distillation yet of what Iraqi's art style, would eventually kind of become.
Mm-hmm.
I do like how they kind of kept that element alive, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I think again the anime production knows that Phantom Blood is not peak JoJo.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was saying, it goes on for 3 volumes of manga. I said probably about 45-ish chapters, while the anime is about 8 or 9 episodes, I think. It wraps things up really, really quickly. Like, so you got your first 3 episodes, which establish Jonathan and Dio's, like, relationship. And then the stuff happens where Dio becomes a vampire. And then it kind of starts to lose its way a little bit from there, like episodes 4, 5, and 6 kind of see, I guess, because it's all rough, by the way. Episode 4 and 5, I guess, establish JoJo's training, where he meets his master character. And then before you know it, we've been swept off to whatever, King's Close, Halloween, whatever the hell it's called. But the final location of the series, in the manga, it definitely took like a lot more time. But again, you can kind of see that in the manga, there's certainly a lot more that Hiroaki is struggling with how to make a Victorian horror thriller series consistently interesting to an audience of teen boys who really just want to see, battles, and then the series changes gears then towards the second half, which introduces new characters who just come up out of nowhere. There's battles and now it seems like we're ragging on like Phantom Blood. I guess we kind of are a bit, because it isn't very good, to be honest.
Well, yeah, just putting it pretty boldly there.
It isn't very good, and I think most people kind of know about it, but I do think there is a certain charm to it. And I think the anime is... I prefer the anime version of Phantom Blood than the manga version, because it's much more distilled. And I think the first 3 episodes are actually really good. I think the stuff with Dio and Jonathan is really well established.
Yeah. Well, I think we should talk about the characters in a bit more depth.
Sure.
So first of all, we kind of already talked about the man himself, Jonathan Joestar.
Mm-hmm.
He's just good.
He's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy. A privileged rich boy, I guess.
Privileged rich boy, and. He believes in good and justice and all this sort of stuff. He's a good guy, and people, for the most part, like him. He's maybe like a well-mannered gentleman, and he's, as I said, he's not the best. He's a very dull main protagonist, and there's a reason for that, as I talked about earlier, but it's all set dressing really for the true star of Phantom Blood, which is Dio Brando.
Yeah, Dio is a lot more fun than JoJo.
Dio is the absolute highlight of Phantom Blood and an absolute fan favourite. Obviously I don't want to give too much away about future JoJo stuff, but this isn't the last time the Dio name is whispered. His influence spreads across the parts, which is why I think it's important to watch part 1, because you'll get stuff much later on down the line, which is really important to kind of experience. But Dio's great. I love his conniving nature. I love how he's just pure evil and he loves it. He does horrible things. Like, he kills JoJo's dog at one point just to spite him. Oh, yeah.
That's,
massively toned down from the manga.
Yeah.
It's a bit too much of a manga, to be honest. But, he does all sorts of horrible things to Jonathan. And, when he turns into a vampire, he just goes full ham and, it's great. It's really fun. But, so Dio is meant to be in sharp contrast to Jonathan. Now, one thing I think where Phantom Blood really lets itself down is, I think, again, Hiroaki is looking at what's popular in manga at that time, At that time, we always think of shonen stuff these days as kind of all been about the big, wider cast of characters. Well, back in those days, it was much more about individuals, The main character of Fist of an All-Star, for example, It wasn't until later on, as things developed with stuff like Dragon Ball, for example, where we started getting bigger roster of characters, if you know what I mean.
Okay, yeah.
And that bigger, wider shonen cast of characters, which we kind of know and love, kind of thing. And I think that's definitely reflected a lot in JoJo, in Jonathan's supporting characters. We have the so lovable Speedwagon, who people are obsessed with for some reason.
I thought we were going to talk about him last.
No, it's fine. So we've got we've got Speedwagon, which some people are obsessed with.
I mean...
I was just so excited to talk about Speedwagon, and I know we said we were going to talk about him last, but I'm just really excited to talk about him and how I do not get the obsession with this character. People on the internet love Speedwagon, and I think he's a bit shit.
Yeah,
I like him because of that.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? It's a bit of an ironic fandom.
It's an ironic fandom, yeah.
Hey, maybe we're wrong. Maybe Speedwagon's actually genuinely great, and we just haven't seen it, and... If you can explain why, please let us know.
Please do. Because I've watched the anime twice and I've read the manga. I do not get the obsession with Speedwagon, at least to the degree that it is. Again, because he's as I said, he's a random street urchin which Jonathan meets. He's the leader of a local gang, I guess. And he's got a funny hat, but him and Jonathan get into a fight when Jonathan goes to London to look for a cure for his sick dad, and Speedwagon's got the full intention of killing Jonathan. But then he's so moved by Jonathan's pure commitment to rescuing his dad, he completely falls in love with the guy, swears servitude to him, and he's just there for he's there for Jonathan. He's so loyal.
Immediately Jonathan's best mate.
He loves him. He loves everything. Every action Jonathan takes is oh my god, he's the best and he's amazing, and oh my god. But he's got a funny hat and stuff, and he kind of speaks funny, and he's an odd character in a strange fandom. And
his character arc is as abrupt and jarring as it sounds.
Yeah, literally, he's one scene he's about to kill Jonathan, then the next scene he's knocking about with him like he's his best mate.
Yeah,
it's so weird.
I think he even at the end, in the last episode of part 1, I think he even describes Jonathan as his best friend as he's watching him sail off on a ship with just absolute fondness in his eyes, and I think that maybe that's why everyone loves Speedwagon. He's
so loyal.
He's simple. He's simple man of simple motivations. He loves Jonathan, and that's it.
He only wants to see good things for the Joestar family.
Yeah, which. Well, I feel like he's about to be disappointed.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So then joining Jonathan and best boy Speedwagon on the on the quest is Jonathan's Hamon master. He's Hamon, as was mentioned earlier, is the energy force of this world that we use for fighting and stuff. And the guy who just completely out of the blue teaches Jonathan this technique is called Baron Zeppeli. He also has a funny hat, and he punches a frog at one point.
As you do.
So again, this character is massively underdeveloped. but it doesn't quite have the charm of Speedwagon.
Yeah.
Again, he just pops up because he's like, oh, I've got a beef with the mask and I want to help you beat Dio. Alright, cool. And then Jonathan's learning this technique. It kind of reminded me of Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, where like Obi-Wan pops up out of nowhere. And then Luke's completely loyal to like this like thing after only knowing it for like, a day. Jonathan's a little bit like that. But yeah, again, but Baron Zeppeli is, like he's got a bit of personality to him. He's memorable, but he's just not very good. Tragically, he dies towards the end fighting Bluford or what was the name of the other knight?
I don't know. It's no point asking me.
The ones in Legend, aren't they? The Arthur,
Yeah.
the whole Mary Queen of Scots thing, which pops about of.
Oh yeah, that was pretty random.
Yeah. Tarkus, that's it, yeah. Bluford and Tarkus, yeah, like the knights who served Mary Queen of Scott or whatever, but all this happens in part one, like all this random stuff just happens.
It is as strange and bizarre as it sounds, probably.
Yeah, this is true. And again, I think that's one of the things to the anime's credit, where like it uses poor storytelling in the manga to like its kind of effect, where like it's just throwing stuff at you constantly. Like all these weird things, So as I mentioned, Jonathan, Speedwagon, and Baron Zeppeli go to this cove town where Dio's made his base, basically, and they end up fighting two knights, Tarkus and Bluford, who were knights who served Mary Queen of Scots, and the two of them are sentenced to death by Queen Elizabeth II. Yes, you get to see anime Queen Elizabeth II, which was pretty funny.
Yeah.
And then they've been, because of their eternal hatred, they're brought back by Dio to fight Jonathan, and yeah, like it's all incredibly silly. But as I said, the fight scenes themselves, when it starts becoming more of a battle manga, I said there is, I think, a real desire by Hiroaki to make the fights interesting, because Jonathan has to use his Hamon techniques in interesting ways. But as I said, the reverse is that it makes Hamon seem like so much weaker compared to the power of like the vampires, which is definitely a problem which Hiroaki dealt with in part 2. By when part 2 ends, he just gets rid of it. So yeah, so we have a big fight with Dio in a castle. Things seemingly end well. Jonathan abruptly cuts off Dio's head, which is great, and Jonathan saves the day. Some randomers turn up who are kind of friends of Baron Zeppeli, including Strazio, who's going to become a character in part 2. And they defeat Dio and defeat his army of vampires and ghouls and whatever. And Jonathan and Irina get married, and they set sail to New York, but haha, plot twist along the way. Dio's actually not dead, he's now a head in a jar.
Just a head, yeah.
Which is great, I love that. Like, Dio's just a head in a jar, and he has conspired this whole thing to basically kill Jonathan, which he actually does succeed in doing.
Yeah.
And blowing up the whole ship, but Irina survives.
Survives with a baby she's rescued.
And she's actually pregnant.
She's also pregnant.
We as viewers don't know that at the time until part 2. So I don't know, like, I think with part 1, I think the first 3 episodes are good. I like everything up until Dio becomes a vampire. Like, I think all that stuff works really, really well in the anime. Dio becomes a vampire, it's a great action set piece. It's really fun to watch. Mm-hmm. And then I think it all starts to fall apart. By around episode 4, 5, you can tell that Hiroaki was struggling with it, and the anime is just trying to do the absolute best that it can to make up for it. There's lots of like fun visual styles of change of the colour palettes and stuff, and as I said, it uses some of the poor storytelling to its advantage by just throwing random shit at the screen, basically. But I actually like the final episodes where Jonathan's on the boat and stuff. I think that stuff's really good.
Yeah, it's pretty wild the way that goes down. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. So my thoughts on part 1 as someone who likes JoJo later on is that it's very flawed and probably quite frustrating, but there's clear signs of where it's going to go. Now I don't know what it would have been like for Grace. What are your thoughts on part 1?
I mean, it's part 1, it's strange and sometimes fun.
Yeah, occasionally fun, yeah.
Yeah, it's. I know. I mean, it's silly, schlocky fun. It's probably one of those where, like, if I didn't know that it gets better, which I do, because that is what everyone tells you about JoJo. It continues to get better.
Yeah.
I think I would think this one's not really my bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's entirely fair. That's entirely fair. I don't think it's anyone's bag, really.
Okay.
I don't think there's any JoJo fan who will say that part 1 is their favourite.
Oh, okay.
Like, I think that would be very, very odd. Maybe someone who's upset that they killed Jonathan at the end of the part. I don't know. Like, if there's continued... Yeah, like some like Bob Dylan fans, for example, are still upset that like Bob Dylan went electric in the 60s.
Oh, I didn't know, but okay.
Yeah. You know, maybe it's a bit like that with JoJo. Maybe there's some people who are still upset that they killed off their poster boy hero, Jonathan. You know,
yeah.
I don't know. Which we should say as well was a fairly unprecedented move at the time. Jump was like, you can't kill off the main character. And then Hiroaki was like, watch me, hold my beer. But then, in doing so, that kind of gives the genius and the staying power that JoJo has, where, like, you know, by making it a generational thing, you can change gears to do something different. And, you know, for future ones, you've got, like part 3 is like a road trip, part 4 is like a murder mystery, part 5 is all based around, like, gangster and mafiosa, part 6 is about the American prison system. You know, it's all really interesting and exciting stuff. Part 2 is... where things for me kind of get good. I do generally hold the anime version of Part 2, Battle Tendency, genuinely being good. I just like it. I think it's fun. It's a much more pure distillation of, I think, of the sort of thing that Hiroaki wanted to do with Part 1 of JoJo, but just didn't have the space or the time or the right sets of characters to do it. But, I mean, I guess we'll move on to Part 2.
Yep, okay. So, premise of Part 2, we pick up in New York City... and we meet Joseph Joestar. Yeah, I got it this time.
Yes.
Who is just kind of knocking around New York City.
He's the grandson of Jonathan, we should say.
Oh, yeah. He dotes on his grandma, great-grandma.
No, grandma. Yeah.
He dotes on his grandma, Arena, and...
they moved to New York recently.
Finds out that Speedwagon's... who is, you know, still in his life.
Yes, Speedwagon's become like the grandfather that he never had because he never met Jonathan.
Yeah.
And in the interim period, Speedwagon's become like a multi-millionaire.
Yeah, he's like an oil baron.
He's like an oil baron.
I guess he's probably like destroyed the environment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But Speedwagon's gone on some expedition and has gone missing.
So the expedition is about basically finding the origins of the mask. We didn't really talk about the masks that much in Part 1, but, you know, basically I said there's this mask of the Joestar family which we discover can turn people into vampires, and that's how Dio's able to do all the things that he does. Part 2 is much more about exploring the origin of the mask, I guess. Because I said, Part 1, the first few episodes, is more of a Victorian horror mystery thriller sort of thing, and part of the mystery is based around this mask, this kind of like demonic mask which can turn people into vampires. And Part 2 is about finding out the origins of the mask.
Yeah, so he goes looking for Speedwagon, who I think has been captured by Nazis, along with these pillar men who are
the creators of the mask.
The creators of the mask, who are like basically what it says on the tin, men who are like frozen into pillars. They soon come alive, and JoJo has to go on a quest to fight them and stop them from doing bad shit. Yeah,
it's very simple. Again, it's very simple, but I would make the argument it is much better executed than Part 1. I think it kind of gets a lot closer to the spirit that JoJo eventually kind of finds in Part 3, but there's still some rough patches to Part 2. But I would hold, especially the anime version, because I prefer the anime version again to the manga. I would hold Part 2 up as being genuinely good and entertaining and worth watching Part 1 just to get to Part 2. And right off the bat, you know, if you want to talk about characters, then right off the bat, Joseph is a much more fun main character than Jonathan. He's brash, he's rude, you know, like, I love how he always runs away from all his problems and stuff, like, his solution to most things is to run away. But also, like, I like how he uses, like, tricks and stuff to get out of, like, situations. You know, like, he uses his mind to kind of get out of problems and stuff, and the Hammond, the battle system is still around, and it's still not quite there, but again, because of the way that it's used in this part, it does come across as again being stronger than it is in Part 1, which is good. But yeah, right off the bat, Joseph is a much more likeable and charismatic protagonist than Jonathan.
Yeah, he's he's a bad boy, but also he like listens to and respects his grandma. So if his grandma says no, then that's it.
Yeah, there's a wonderful scene in the first episode where Joseph is wanting to like beat up a racist because they in the first episode again. I think it's a great character introduction where Joseph gets to New York and basically he rescues a young boy who's getting shit from some police.
Yeah,
because he's black. He does have a slightly unfortunate name.
Which is Smokey.
Smokey, yeah.
Which maybe is a little unfortunate for you one black character, but otherwise he is a decent character, and it's nice that there's some like representation here.
Yeah, I wish Smokey was in it more.
Same.
I like Smokey. I think Smokey could have been like this series as like a Speedwagon who's so loyal to Joseph, but better because like Joseph actually does something to help Smokey.
Yeah.
Like some police are giving Smokey shit because, they think he's stolen something.
I think he actually has stolen something. He actually did nick JoJo's wallet, but also...
When Joseph's buying Coca-Cola as well, which is a good scene.
But also the police are corrupt and racist, so they are trying to, like, get him to steal stuff for them. And they'll take a cut.
But there's a wonderful scene in a restaurant where Joseph basically takes Smokey out to have like a nice meal, and then some patron of the restaurant's been racist, and Joseph's about to like square up and fight the guy.
Yeah, and Arena's like, yeah, grandson, go on, beat them up. He's rude to our friend.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
I think Arena actually has really benefited from an age up. She's actually a lot cooler as an old lady. She's way cooler,
yeah. Because again, like in part one, she's like
she's kind of a non-entity.
She's there just to be supportive to Jonathan, but time has been good to the woman. She's clearly experienced stuff, and which is great. And you kind of get the idea that like this Joestar bloodline, this kind of cursed Joestar bloodline thing that it has going on. But yeah, so Joseph eventually faces up against a new vampire who's hit the scene, similar powers to Dio. Only this time it's just Stadazio, who was a random character who was introduced to the background of part one. He's part of a random party who come to help defeat Dio. It's random in the manga, it's random in the anime, because like he's not very well established, but there's not a lot they can do really. Stadazio come and causes problems in modern day New York, and Joseph has to defeat him. And Stadazio basically says that the Nazis have found the creators of the masks, and they need to be stopped and all this sort of stuff or whatever. And Joseph then goes to rescue Speedwagon, who's been kidnapped by the Nazis because Nazis are in this as well.
Just a small thing.
Yeah, because they basically found it kind of taps into that like Raiders of the Lost Ark thing of the Nazis being interested in the occult and using that to help them win World War II. So we want to try and unlock the mysteries of the masks to help them in the oncoming World War II, which is a thing. So Joseph travels down to Mexico to rescue Speedwagon, and along the way he has a couple of encounters before eventually finding this Nazi facility. There's a really funny scene where Joseph dresses up as a woman and tries to sneak into the encampment, which is a fun scene, I thought. And eventually he comes face to face with the first of the Pillar Men. But more importantly, we meet my favourite side character from part 2, Stroheim, who's like the Nazi general, who's a really fun character. He's a Nazi. He becomes like a cyborg later on in the series, which is cool. Like he comes back later on, like in part 2 as like a cyborg. And I don't know, like, the voice actor, I think a huge part's the voice actor. Okay. Like, he hams it up. He's so wonderfully hammy, and, like, he's so OTT. Great performance, great vocal performance. But I think the character as well is really fun as well, But anyway, Joseph has his first fight with one of these Pillar Men, and, like, he's like a strange entity, kind of like Aztec-y, like really ancient beings, and they're so much more powerful than Joseph is, and him and Stroheim just barely managed to defeat this Pillarman, just barely managed to do it because his being is so much more powerful than them.
There's a great bit where Stroheim, he gets his leg cut off, and then the Pillar Man hides inside his cut off leg, or inside his stump.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I feel like that scene just kind of sums up what the experience of JoJo has been like for me. Just a very strange
stuff happens, you just have to go along with it.
You just have to go along with it, man.
It's all part of the fun. But yes, yeah, so then following that, Joseph learns that there's more Pillarmen, they're all going to be coming soon, and he needs to travel to Venice. So yeah, so he basically told he needs to go to Venice to meet a Hamon master called Lisa, who's got more information about the Pillarmen. He gets there, and there's a wonderful scene where he's eating a black ink spaghetti. And he's like, why does my spaghetti look like this? And he's like, oh, it's just the way it is, sir. And Joseph isn't having any of it until he meets a womanizing, boorish, effeminate character who we learn is actually the grandson of Baron Zeppeli, our favourite character from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 1, Phantom Blood. He had a grandson. He's called Caesar Zeppeli, and instantly, again, Caesar is a much more fun character than Baron Zeppeli ever was. He's more snarky, he's more confident with his Hamon. His Hamon power's a bit weird, he uses like bubbles, which is funny.
Yeah.
But, him and Joseph's rivalry, because he also goes to train under Lisa. The two rivalry they have, I really do think is like the heart of Part 2.
Yeah.
Like, I really like their friendship and rivalry. I think it's really good.
They're frenemies.
They're frenemies, yeah. It's really good. Like, it's really fun watching the two of them play off of each other. But the two of them go to train under Lisa. Who is this female Hamon master and one of the few lead female JoJo characters for a bit.
I felt that she kind of comes. I mean, for me anyway, she felt like an Izumi Curtis prototype.
Yeah, definitely
from Full Metal Alchemist. Yeah, almost like not definitely, but it's possible that I think Hiromu Okawa saw this character and was like, oh, that's an interesting idea, and then she really expanded on that and kind of went into a lot more depth.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So I don't know, she's a good character again. She's fun. Doesn't get she does go some development later on, but
yeah, there is a twist with her that kind of makes some things a little odd and awkward in retrospect.
Yeah.
I guess we're kind of talking spoilers.
Yeah.
Aren't we? So it turns out she's actually JoJo's mum.
Yes.
Which that's an interesting twist. It does make it a little awkward because of the way she was kind of sexualized.
Well, yeah, Joseph peeks through into her bathroom at one point.
Yeah.
And, bit pre-knowing, of course. But,
not knowing that she's his mum. Also, because of Hamon and stuff, she looks not old enough to be his mum, which is a thing.
So I mean, I think the whole mum twist thing was something that Hiroaki came up with at the 11th hour.
Okay, that would make sense, because
I don't think he went in with that being the twist, but then realised, I need to wrap this thing up. Oh, I could do this. That's only my guess, but they kind of go with that angle. But then one of the Pillarmen turn up at AC/DC, who just makes me laugh because he's called AC/DC. And him and Joseph have a good fight, again putting the Hamon energy stuff to use. And then something which is a real portent, I think, for the future of JoJo and more the sorts of stories which Hiroaki starts to do, and certainly in Part 3. AC/DC does survive the fight, becomes like a brain, and attaches himself to the back of people. So it was a really fun scene where they have to basically defeat AC/DC's brain, who's lodged itself in the brain of one of the female, I guess, servants of Lisa, which is a really fun episode. And that's the sort of stories which are done in Part 3, just really weird. We've got this weird situation, how are we going to beat it, kind of thing, and the solution to beating AC/DC ultimately is really interesting and unexpected. But all this fun is brought to a big close with the arrival of the other Pillarmen, Wamu and Kars. Kars being the leader of the Pillarmen, and basically each of them, which I mentioned before we go see Lisa, each of them was basically put a ring inside JoJo,
which is going to poison him in a month, unless he fights them and
defeats them. Which is where the tension comes from of why JoJo has a month to train with Lisa, because these rings will disintegrate and kill him basically. So if he defeats AC/DC, the first ring gets disintegrated, and then he goes off to fight Wamu, And this time we're going to like Switzerland, I guess. I can't remember.
Yeah, I know, it was snowing.
It was snowing, and
Yeah.
like, I have a feeling it was Switzerland. I might be wrong, but I feel it might be Switzerland. Where they hook up again with Stroheim, who's become, like a cyborg, which is fun. And then they go off to fight Wamu, like in this kind of haunted mansion sort of thing. Caesar Zeppeli's kind of gotten frustrated with everything. He just wants to go in and just fight. While in a key bit of character growth, Joseph's like, no, you know what, we need to hand back a bit. Caesar can't understand why, because of his family's history with the Pillar Men of the Masks. He's so incensed he needs to defend his family on. He goes to fight Wamu, and they have a good fight, and then he sadly dies.
And there is some heavy Christian imagery.
Yeah,
he gets crushed by this
stone
crucifix-shaped, big block of stone.
But I actually felt something like, you know,
Yeah.
I remember I watched part 2 maybe, 2-3 years ago, and I just got stupidly like committed to this silly part 2 malarkey, you know, like I was like, oh no, Caesar Zeppeli's dead.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, I think especially the bit where JoJo and Lisa are walking around and they're like, oh, this is where he died, and it's so overwrought.
It's so overwrought, yeah,
but
it's really good.
It just kind of works.
It does work.
Yeah.
I think it works quite well. And then that then gives JoJo then the motivation then to go fight Wamu and Cars. They fight like in this arena sort of thing. I actually really like the fight between JoJo and Wamu. We fight like in chariots and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I think that's a really great action scene.
It's
Again,
definitely unusual.
It's unusual, and again, an example of how Hiroaki wanted to make the fights in JoJo interesting and different. It's not just two guys or two gals beating the crap out of each other. It's different, it's interesting, you know, and I think that fight is really good. Wamu, of course, is defeated by JoJo in a pretty spectacular fashion, and then we get the final competition between JoJo and Cars. As it transpires, what the Pillar Men have been after this whole time is basically this red jewel, which Lisa's been in possession of, and when you combine this jewel with this mask, you can become like an all-powerful being or something, which Cars succeeds in doing, and he becomes like an all-powerful being. The whole gang turn up. Stroheim turns up with his gang of Nazis, and we've got like ultraviolet lights to help defeat Cars' like army of vampires. Speedwagon and Smokey turn up to not really do anything, but more give emotional support to Joseph to cheer him on, basically. And that's when all the twist about Lisa comes out. And it culminates in what I do think is a great final confrontation between Joseph and Cars, where Joseph is basically gonna like ascend Cars into like a volcano. He's gonna like he basically rams an airplane into Cars and like just sends him into a volcano and stuff, and that's how he's gonna defeat him. And I loved it. It's so stupid, but like it's so fun to watch. And then then him and Stroheim defeat Cars basically, and it's a great scene. And you actually think Joseph is dead for a little bit. And they all mourn over his grave and stuff.
And then he just rocks up to his own funeral.
And he's got married to the girl who got
possessed.
Who got possessed and stuff. And it's great and totally in keeping with Joseph's character. So I mean, like you have a really nice montage at the end as well. What happens to like all the characters and stuff. And I don't know, like unlike part 1, I cared about quite a lot of the characters. So when the names came up, you know, like especially when you see Stroheim, such a ridiculous character, like, you know, like he died fighting the Russians in World War II. I was like, oh.
Oh, my favourite Nazi.
My favourite Nazi character. Not I'm sympathising with the Nazis or anything, because I condemn them. But Stroheim, I kind of felt something for Stroheim at the end. I had complicated feelings about him, okay?
Okay.
But yeah, no, and then part 2 ends with Joseph as an old man, silver-haired fox. He's travelling to Japan because Hiroaki needed an excuse to set part 3 in Japan. So Joseph's daughter married a Japanese man and had a Japanese English. Yeah, because Joseph's English. He had like a English-Japanese son who is going to be Josuke Joestar, who is going to be in... I don't know if his last name's Joestar, but he's definitely called Josuke. And he is going to be the main character of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 3 Stardust Crusaders, which is where I really fell in love with this series. But for now, we're just left with the ending of Part 2. So you probably got the impression I like Part 2 quite a fair bit. I think it's really fun for what it is. I think it's a good distillation of what Hiroaki was trying to do in Part 1, but more successfully. What did you think of part 2? Because I've talked quite a lot about it.
I liked it more than part 1, definitely. It was a lot of schlocky fun. I think it is a lot of battles, and I do tend to like, after so many, I do, even if they're interesting, I do tend to like phase out a bit, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, so I liked it. I think it's still not entirely my kind of thing, but I'm sure that will change eventually. We'll get to either, like, I don't know, part 3 or maybe part 4, and I will probably really start to get into it then.
Yeah, as I said, I appreciated both parts 1 and 2 more coming back to it after seeing what happens, where JoJo goes after this. Because like part 3 is a lot of battles, but like they're not like traditional fights, if you know what I mean. But like some of them are, but a lot of them are about like mental gymnastics and stuff, and like it's really fun. Like, they find ways of doing battles that aren't necessarily just, again, people beating each other up and making it interesting. But as I said, I think for what it is, for a battle manga made in like the late 80s, I think battle tendency is really fun. I think it's good. And I said I think the anime is really good as well. I think the anime is a lot of fun. The animation's consistently good, and yeah, it's just a blast, really. Mm-hmm. I had a good time with it. Yeah,
I liked it.
Good.
Liked it, not loved it, I guess. Yeah.
That's fair. All right, cool. So there's 2 openings, I guess.
Oh yeah.
To talk about with JoJo season 1, each one for each part of the series. I mean, I pretty much know probably. Well, I know what my number 1 is.
Okay.
What's your least favourite?
I don't remember what they're called, but I think I actually maybe liked the second one less.
Really? Okay. I like the second one more.
I mean that's fair.
So the first one, just to clarify, the first one is called JoJo Sono Chi no Sadame, which is JoJo That Blood's Destiny, sung by Hiroaki Tominaga, and the second one is called Bloody Stream by Coda, and each one is done for parts 1, part 2. So the first one is much more like brassy and a bit more like operatic, while the second one's a bit more like a groovy little number.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe I just prefer those kind of big operatic numbers, I guess.
I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I like both songs, like the first one's got that, Sodo hito dashite JoJo. I like the chorus keeps on repeating like JoJo. Like it's really fun. But I prefer Bloody Stream because I think it's a bit more of a groove to it. But the weirdest element probably is that the ending theme for both parts is Roundabout by progressive rock band Yes, which is like, it's got to be one of the strangest choices ever for like an ending song. I never thought I'd hear prog rock, like classic prog rock used in anime, but so the story goes that apparently with the anime, they asked Hiroaki what songs were influencing him when he was writing the respective parts, what he was listening to quite a lot of. So that's who he said Roundabout. I listened to quite a lot of Yes around the time I was doing that, so the ending song is Roundabout, I guess. And Roundabout's a good choice as well, because like it doesn't really get stale, because it's like an 8-minute song, and it goes through lots of different moods and chord changes. They're able to like pick different sections which suit the different of what's going on in the episode. There's like a slower part of Roundabout which we use during like sad episodes, or there's a more fast part which is used for like an episode which has been a bit more like battle heavy. So it's a good choice, definitely. And they continue to do fun. They continue to use fun songs in future installments of the anime. So I mean, like, we didn't launch straight into watching Stardust Crusaders. We'll be doing that in the near future, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I mean, JoJo's a weird beast. Like, it's hard to know where to like begin talking about it, I guess. But the only way to do it is just to start at the beginning and just work your way through and see this great series come together, really. It doesn't start out great, but I think it gets better, definitely.
So, yeah, I guess we should talk overall rankings.
Tricky one, because as I said, what we're going to do is we're going to have to, because we're watching them so separately, I think we're just going to have to split them up into the respective parts when we talk about each one individually. But as I said, because I think parts 1 and part 2 are so linked together, if there's any JoJo part which is like a literal sequel, it is this one.
Yeah.
We just have to put them together because it just gets too complicated then.
Yeah.
So where would you rank this season?
I have to be honest, I would probably put this at the bottom of my list, under Death Note. Because even though, you know, Death Note is less consistent than this show, I think I enjoy Death Note at its best with its mind games and stuff more than the kind of schlocky fights of JoJo. So yeah, that's where I'd put it.
That's fair. My intellectual side is agreeing with you, but I'm putting this above Death Note because I think whilst yes, I think Death Note's highs are probably better than JoJo's highs. Death Note ended on such a damp squib for me. The final half was such a bitter taste in my mouth. While with JoJo, it just gets better. It starts off like pretty mixed, and then it kind of just gets better and better. Like, you know, I think in that regard, I think I have to look at it from my perspective, which was more successful at what it was trying to do. You know, JoJo is just trying to be a fun, slightly weird battle manga anime series, and I think it succeeds more at that than Death Note does at being a psychological thriller, just because of how the second half completely falls on its arse. But it's apples and oranges at the end of the day, because both are problems, and you know, neither are perfect. So.
Yeah, and of course, it's not about best, as we said many times.
Not best, no.
This is about pure subjective favoritism.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I had more fun personally watching JoJo than I did watching Death Note again. Definitely.
Okay, well.
Right, okay.
So I guess next time will we see you guys, or you hear us, I suppose. We'll be talking about Paranoia Agent.
Oh, very exciting. The Satoshi Kon take on Twin Peaks. I was very excited to go back to this one, and I think we're pretty excited to talk about it as well. So
yeah.
Tune in a couple weeks' time where we'll talk about Paranoia Agent. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode of Where There's a Weeb, There's a Way. If you liked the show, make sure to like, rate and subscribe to us. You can follow us on Twitter @ThereWeeb, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time.